And we begin with that sad breaking news we are just learning about as we come on the air. Val Kilmer, the legendary Hollywood actor, has died aged 65 after a battle with pneumonia.
Hollywood has lost a legend. On April 1st, 2025, Val Kilmer, a fearless performer, a true original, passed away at 65. Known for unforgettable roles in Top Gun, The Doors, Tombstone, and Batman Forever, he was more than an actor. He was a storyteller with a fire in his soul. After years of battling throat cancer and the complications that followed, he leaves behind a legacy as bold and complex as the characters he played. This is not just a look back. It's a celebration of the man who made us feel, who made us think, who made us believe. From his earliest dreams to his final days, this is the journey of Val Kilmer. Val Edward Kilmer was born on New Year's Eve, 1959, in Los Angeles, the heart of American cinema. He was the middle child of Eugene and Gladys Kilmer, raised with two brothers in the wide-open sunshine of California's San Fernando Valley. It was a landscape of palm trees and possibility, of dreams being chased and captured under hot studio lights. From the beginning, Val was surrounded by both beauty and complexity. His childhood, while filled with the color and energy of a creative household, was marked early by emotional upheaval. When Val was just 9 years old, his parents' marriage came to an end. Divorce is never easy on a child, and for Val, it was a moment that cracked the foundation of his world. Though he and his brothers went to live with their father after the split, the connection between father and son began to fray. Over time, Val would describe their relationship as distant, even strained, a divide that would deepen as the years passed. He once said of his early years, "I was quiet, thoughtful, always lost in some kind of daydream." The pain of that separation wasn't something he wore on the outside, but it colored how he saw the world, with both caution and curiosity. That fracture at home may have been the first step in his journey toward storytelling, a way to make sense of life by stepping into someone else's skin. But if the divorce marked a turning point, it was nothing compared to the tragedy that would strike 8 years later. In 1977, Val's world was shattered. His younger brother, Wesley, just 15 years old, died in a drowning accident. Wesley suffered from epilepsy and had a seizure while swimming. The result was sudden and devastating. Val was only 17 at the time. Still a teenager, still trying to find his way in a fractured world, he was suddenly confronted with a loss so profound that words would fail most people. Wesley wasn't just a sibling. He was a creative, kindred spirit. They had made short films together, written little stories, shared secret jokes. Losing him was like losing a part of himself, the part that laughed the hardest and dreamed the biggest. Years later, Val would reflect on Wesley's death with haunting clarity. He said, "It forced me to look at life differently. I had to face questions about existence, about why we're here, long before I was ready." The grief didn't vanish with time. It echoed in his work, in the characters he chose to portray, in the intensity he brought to every role. It wasn't just acting for him. It was expression, healing, survival. And yet, through all that pain, Val didn't fall apart. He moved forward, slowly, deliberately. That same year, as if fueled by the energy of loss and the urgency of life, he made a bold decision. He would pursue acting seriously. Not as a hobby, not as a fleeting idea, but as a calling. It was around that time that he auditioned for the Juilliard School in New York City. He didn't just get in, he became the youngest student ever accepted into their elite drama division. A boy from the Valley, carrying the weight of grief and the spark of something extraordinary. now walking the halls of one of the most prestigious acting schools in the world. It was a beginning born from heartbreak, and yet it was also a sign that through the worst pain, something powerful could emerge. Val's childhood was not a fairy tale. It was messy, human, and at times unbearably sad. But those early experiences planted the seeds of the artist he would become. His sense of loss gave him empathy. His fractured family life gave him depth. His brother's death gave him urgency, the sense that time is not guaranteed, and that we must use whatever time we're given to create, to connect, to feel something real. Looking back, it's easy to see how the boy who grew up in the aftermath of divorce, who mourned his brother in silence, became the man who could disappear into roles with such emotional precision. It wasn't performance, it was truth. Val Kilmer didn't just play characters. He lived them. He carried them. He bled into them. And it all started here, with a boy in the valley, learning how to make sense of a world that didn't always make sense to him. In the wake of unimaginable loss, Val Kilmer didn't retreat. He turned to art. Still carrying the weight of his brother Wesley's sudden death, Val discovered a new outlet for his emotions: the stage. While attending high school in Los Angeles, he stumbled into the drama department almost by chance. But once he was there, something clicked. The chaos in his heart found structure in the rhythm of Shakespeare, the honesty of Tennessee Williams, the rawness of Chekhov. For the first time, he saw a path where he could channel everything he was feeling, and everything he didn't know how to say. He wasn't just good at it. He was born for it. At 17, still bruised from tragedy, but burning with ambition, Val did something extraordinary. He auditioned for the Juilliard School's drama division in New York City. Juilliard wasn't just prestigious, it was a crucible for the world's greatest actors. And Val didn't just get accepted. He became the youngest student ever to join their elite Group 10. In a single moment, the boy from the valley stepped onto a bigger stage, one that would shape him into the artist he was destined to become. For Val, Juilliard was more than a school. It was a sanctuary. The rigor of daily scene work, the endless hours dissecting character, voice, and movement, it gave his grief a place to land. It gave his passion discipline. It gave his wandering spirit a home. He immersed himself in classical training, often working late into the night while others had already gone home. His classmates, many of whom would go on to become stars themselves, remembered him as intense, fiercely committed, and unrelenting in his pursuit of truth on stage. He wasn't just learning how to act, he was learning how to live again. Even during these early years, Val wasn't content to simply follow the curriculum. He wrote and starred in a play called How It All Began, an original piece he developed with classmates. It showed that his talents extended beyond performance. He was a storyteller in the purest sense, someone who didn't just read lines, but sculpted them, breathed life into them, and infused them with his own experience. That creative spark would guide him throughout his career. Years later, reflecting on his time at Juilliard, Val said that it saved him. Not just professionally, but emotionally. I was in a dark place. My brother had just died, and I needed something bigger than myself. Juilliard gave me that, the pressure, the structure. It pushed me to stay focused, to keep moving, to believe in the work. That belief became a compass. Even in his most uncertain moments, he trusted the process of becoming, on stage and off. As his time at Juilliard came to an end, the next chapter opened with a bang. In 1983, Val made his Broadway debut in Slab Boys, a gritty coming-of-age play set in 1950s Scotland. Sharing the stage with Kevin Bacon and Sean Penn, he didn't just hold his own, he stole scenes. Critics took notice of his sharp timing, magnetic presence, and the quiet storm of emotion he brought to every moment. It was clear this wasn't just another talented theater kid. This was someone different, someone with weight. The leap from Juilliard to Broadway was a rite of passage for many actors. For Val, it was proof that his pain, his struggle, his relentless drive to understand the human experience, it all had a place. It mattered. The kid who had once felt lost and silenced by sorrow now stood beneath the lights, heard and seen by an audience that didn't know his story, but felt its echoes in his performance. And though he may have still been processing grief, on stage, he was fearless. Slab Boys marked the first time Val's name appeared on a marquee, but it wouldn't be the last. Hollywood was already knocking, and the momentum was undeniable. With Juilliard in his rearview mirror and Broadway in his back pocket, Val Kilmer was ready to take the next leap into the spotlight of cinema. But long before he became Iceman, or Jim Morrison, or Batman, he was just a young man standing on a stage in New York, telling stories not because he had to, but because it was the only thing that made the world feel real again. Val Kilmer didn't just arrive in Hollywood. He kicked the door open with a wink and a punchline. His first film role came in 1984 with Top Secret, a wild, offbeat comedy from the creators of Airplane. It was a bizarre mashup of Elvis musicals and Cold War spy thrillers, and Kilmer played it all straight, which only made it funnier. As Nick Rivers, a rock and roll star, dropped into an absurd espionage plot, Val sang every note himself and danced like a pro. For a Juilliard-trained stage actor, it was an unexpected first move, but it worked. Audiences saw something special: charm, timing, and a knack for parody that went way beyond slapstick. He wasn't just funny, he was in control, sharp, and magnetic, and Hollywood took notice. The following year, he starred in Real Genius, another offbeat comedy, this time as a brilliant but irreverent science whiz. Val's character, Chris Knight, was effortlessly cool, sarcastically brilliant, and full of that laid-back swagger that would become part of his signature. He played it with ease, floating between comedy and intellect like he was born for the role. These early films revealed an actor who could do more than just deliver a punchline. He could make you believe in the character behind it. Then came 1986. At just 26 years old, Val Kilmer's life changed forever when he stepped into the flight suit of Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kazansky in Top Gun. Iceman was cocky, precise, and unshakably confident, the perfect foil to Tom Cruise's reckless maverick. With his frosted blonde hair and piercing stare, Kilmer didn't need to say much to command attention. His performance was cool, calculated, and instantly iconic. In a film packed with bravado and adrenaline, it was Iceman who stuck in people's minds. And not just because of that legendary line, "You can be my wingman anytime." The film became a global phenomenon, and Kilmer's performance made him a household name. He didn't just play a role, he created a pop culture archetype. Iceman was slick, composed, and dangerously charismatic, and Val wore it like a second skin. Reflecting later, Kilmer laughed about the rivalry on screen. Iceman didn't like Maverick, and that was half the fun. That sense of playfulness and commitment made his performance unforgettable. With Top Gun, Val Kilmer went from promising young actor to certified movie star. The boy from Juilliard had arrived, and he wasn't looking back. After Top Gun rocketed him into stardom, Val Kilmer took a sharp turn away from the skies and into fantasy. In 1988, he transformed into the roguish swordsman Mad Mardigan in Willow, a whimsical adventure directed by Ron Howard. With wild hair, quick wit, and swordplay to match, Val leaned into the chaos of the character, delivering a performance that was both larger than life and full of heart. Off-screen, the film also changed his life. It's where he met British actress Joanne Whalley. Their chemistry on set turned into romance, and eventually marriage. But Kilmer wasn't content to stay in one genre. In 1991, he took on a role that would push him further than anything before, stepping into the skin of Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's The Doors. This wasn't just an impersonation. It was a full-body, full-spirit transformation. Kilmer didn't just act like Morrison. He became him. To prove to Stone he was the right choice, Val shot his own audition tape. 8 minutes of hauntingly accurate vocals and movements, channeling the Lizard King in eerie detail. He studied every bit of footage, listened to every recording, and even sang every song in the film himself. The surviving members of The Doors were stunned, unable to tell where Jim ended and Val began. Critics were floored. Roger Ebert called Kilmer's performance the best part of the film, singling it out as a moment of true star-making artistry. The voice, the stare, the reckless poetry, it was all there. Kilmer had disappeared into the role so completely that even audiences began to question what was real. Then came Tombstone in 1993, and another immortal character was born. As the sickly, sharp-tongued Doc Holliday, Kilmer delivered a performance that was both flamboyant and fragile, a man dying with style and killing with precision. With a southern drawl and eyes full of mischief, he delivered the now legendary line, "I'm your huckleberry." That phrase would follow him for the rest of his life, becoming a symbol of his singular presence on screen. By the early 90s, Val Kilmer had proven there was nothing he couldn't do. He was a leading man who could vanish into a rock god, a cowboy, a warrior, and do it all with soul, humor, and unstoppable talent. 1995 was Val Kilmer's peak, a year that stamped his name into Hollywood legend. First came Heat, Michael Mann's masterful crime saga, where Val held his own alongside giants like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. As Chris Shiherlis, the cool, calculated thief, Kilmer delivered grit and heart, anchoring the film's explosive tension with raw intensity. That same year, he stepped into the shadows as the world's most famous vigilante. In Batman Forever, Kilmer suited up as Bruce Wayne, balancing brooding intensity with wounded vulnerability. Facing off against Jim Carrey's Riddler and Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face, he brought a grounded elegance to the role. For Val, it wasn't just a role, it was a dream realized. The kid who once idolized comic book heroes was now one himself, on the biggest stage imaginable. With Heat and Batman Forever, Kilmer wasn't just in demand, he was unstoppable. Val Kilmer's rise came with turbulence. Behind the camera, his fierce commitment to the craft often collided with the realities of big-budget filmmaking. By the mid-90s, that passion, raw and uncompromising, had earned him a reputation as one of Hollywood's most difficult stars. Directors admired his talent, but sometimes struggled with his intensity. On the set of Batman Forever, tensions simmered. Kilmer's dedication clashed with director Joel Schumacher's approach, and the friction between them grew so sharp that Kilmer chose not to return for the sequel. Schumacher didn't mince words after, calling Val the most psychologically troubled human being I've ever worked with. The statement added fuel to the growing narrative that Kilmer was brilliant, but hard to handle. That image only deepened in 1996, when he joined the island of Dr. Moreau, a production already in chaos. Co-starring with Marlon Brando should have been a career milestone, but instead, it became a cautionary tale. Kilmer clashed with the cast, with the crew, and eventually with director John Frankenheimer, who famously said, "There are two things I will never do. I will never climb Mount Everest, and I will never work with Val Kilmer again." The film tanked, and the behind-the-scenes drama overshadowed everything else. By 1997, industry insiders branded him a member of the so-called Hollywood Bad Boys Club. Talented, volatile, and unpredictable. But Val saw it differently. In a later interview, he defended himself plainly. "When people call me demanding, I think it's often a smokescreen for their own lack of preparation. I care deeply about the work. I'm challenging, not difficult." Those who worked closely with him echoed that sentiment. Director Philip Noyce, who collaborated with Kilmer on The Saint, dismissed the rumors. "Most of it is unjustified. The real Val Kilmer is a lamb, and he is the hardest-working actor I've ever seen." Through every setback, one thing never wavered: Kilmer's devotion to his art. Whether misunderstood or misrepresented, he never stopped pushing for honesty in every scene. For him, being good wasn't enough. It had to be true. Off-screen, Val Kilmer's love life was as colorful and compelling as any character he ever played. In the early 1980s, before his name was in lights, he met music icon Cher at a birthday party. Despite the age gap, she was over a decade his senior, sparks flew. Their romance was passionate, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Even after they parted ways, their bond never broke. Cher once called Val one of the few men who truly touched her heart. In her tribute after his passing, she simply wrote, "Valis, you were wild, brilliant, impossible, and so deeply loved. Brave during your sickness. I'll miss you always." Years later, on the set of Willow, Val found love again, this time with his co-star Joanne Whalley. Their chemistry on screen blossomed into real life, and in 1988, they tied the knot. For a brief moment, they seemed to be Hollywood's golden couple. Together, they welcomed two children, a daughter, Mercedes, in 1991, and a son, Jack, in 1995. Val was overjoyed to be a father, often bringing his kids to set, sharing his world with them in the most personal way. But fame and family rarely coexist without tension. Just weeks after Jack was born, Val and Joanne separated. Their divorce was finalized in 1996. Still, despite the heartbreak, Kilmer remained a present, dedicated father, one of the roles he took most seriously. In the years that followed, Val was linked to a number of famous women: supermodel Cindy Crawford, singer Carly Simon, and actress Daryl Hannah. While tabloids loved to paint him as a Hollywood heartbreaker, Val himself was more sentimental. In his memoir, he spoke with kindness about his former partners, emphasizing the friendships that remained even after the romance faded. Yet through it all, the high-profile flings, the public scrutiny, Kilmer never remarried. The most enduring relationship of his life would prove to be with his children. Mercedes and Jack eventually followed their dad into the industry, each carving out their own creative paths. Mercedes starred with him in his later film Pay Dirt, while Jack stepped into acting through indie roles. In his final years, Val often said he found the deepest joy not in fame, but in fatherhood. "No regrets," he once said. "Once you're a star, you're always a star. But being a father? That's the role that matters most." By the mid-2000s teens, Val Kilmer had quietly begun to retreat from the public eye. Fans noticed his absence from red carpets and major roles, and whispers began to circulate about his health. In early 2015, he was rushed to UCLA Medical Center. The official word was vague, possible throat complications. But speculation grew, and concern followed. Kilmer, a devoted Christian Scientist, downplayed the situation. He told fans there was no tumor, no crisis, just a minor issue. Behind the curtain, however, the truth was much heavier. In reality, Val had been diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014. He kept the diagnosis private, reluctant to accept the severity of it, relying instead on his deep belief in spiritual healing. For a long time, he resisted aggressive medical treatment, convinced that prayer and faith would guide him through. It was only when his condition worsened, and after heartfelt pleas from his children, Mercedes and Jack, that he agreed to undergo chemotherapy, radiation, and eventually a tracheostomy. The procedures would save his life, but not without sacrifice. The tracheostomy permanently altered his voice, reducing it to a strained whisper. For an actor celebrated for his commanding, expressive tone, the same voice that once roared across stages and brought Jim Morrison to life. It was a heartbreaking blow. But Val, ever resilient, faced it with courage. He continued to appear in public, often wearing scarves or ascots to conceal the tube in his throat, turning a medical necessity into a personal style. Speaking became difficult, sometimes exhausting, but he refused to let it stop him. In one interview, he said candidly, "I may sound worse than I feel. Every day is a choice, to breathe or to eat. But I'm still here, still me." Faith remained his anchor. He spoke openly about the power of belief and prayer, and how it had sustained him when nothing else could. He didn't regret the spiritual path he took. He embraced it. In 2017, Kilmer revealed to the world that his cancer was in remission. A hard-won victory. Though his voice had changed, his spirit had not. He was still the artist, the father, the dreamer, proving that even in silence, you can still speak volumes. After years away from the spotlight, Val Kilmer made a stunning return in 2021 with the documentary Val. Built from his own home videos, it offered a raw, deeply personal look at his life, the triumphs, the heartbreak, the illness. Narrated by his son, Jack, the film let Val speak louder than ever, even without a voice. It moved audiences around the world, a reminder that his spirit was as vibrant as ever. Then, in 2022, Iceman took flight one last time. Kilmer reunited with Tom Cruise in Top Gun, Maverick, reprising his iconic role in a scene that was both powerful and deeply emotional. Though brief, his appearance, aided by subtle voice, AI, became the heart of the film. Tom Cruise called it unforgettable. For Val, it was more than a cameo. It was a return, a goodbye, and a victory all in one. In his final years, Val Kilmer lived quietly, surrounded by family, still creating, still dreaming. Though he stepped away from acting, his voice, in spirit, in art, never faded. On April 1st, 2025, Val passed away peacefully at home in Los Angeles. He was 65. The cause was pneumonia, a final challenge for a man who had already endured so much. Tributes poured in from across the world. Friends, fans, and legends of the screen shared their love. Cher called him brave. Josh Brolin remembered him as a brilliant firecracker. His children, Mercedes and Jack, honored him simply, as the father who inspired them to live with purpose. And now, as we say goodbye, we remember Val not just for the roles he played, but for the soul he gave to them. He was Iceman. He was Doctor. He was Morrison. He was Val. And he always will be. Thank you, Val.